Patanjali, the father of the yoga philosophy, doesn't give very many particular directions about pranayama, but later on other yogis found out various things about this pranayama and made of it a great science. With Patanjali, it is one of the many ways, but he doesn't lay much stress on it. He means that you simply throw the air out and draw it in and hold it for some time. That is all. And by that, the mind will become a little calmer. But later on, you will find that out of this is evolved a particular science called pranayam. We shall hear a little of what these later yogis have to say. Some of this I have told you before, but a little repetition will serve to fix it in your minds. First, you must remember that this prana is not the breath, but that which causes the motion of the breath. That which is the vitality of the breath is the prana. Again, the word prana is used for all the senses. They are called pranas. The mind is called prana, and so we see that prana is force. And yet we cannot call it force, because force is only the manifestation of it. It is that which manifests itself as force and everything else in the way of motion. The chitta, the mind stuff, is the engine which draws in the prana from the surroundings and manufactures out of prana the various vital forces, those that keep the body in preservation and thought, will, and all other powers. By the above mentioned process of breathing, we can control all the various motions in the body and the various nerve currents that are running through the body. First, we begin to recognize them, and then we slowly get control over them. Now, these later yogis consider that there are three main currents of this prana in the human body. One they call Ida, another Pingala, and the third Shushumna. Pingala, according to them, is on the right side of the spinal column, and Ida on the left. And in the middle of the spinal column is the Sushumna, an empty channel. Ida and Pingala, according According to them are the currents working in every man, and through these currents we are performing all the functions of life. Sushumna is present in all as a possibility, but it works only in the yogis. You must remember that yoga changes the body. As you go on practicing, your body changes. It is not the same body that you had before the practice. That is very rational and can be explained because every new thought that we have must make, as it were, a new channel through the brain, and that explains the tremendous conservatism of human nature. Human nature likes to run through the ruts that are already there because it is easy. If we think, just for example's sake, that the mind is like a needle and the brain substance a soft lump before it, then each thought that we have makes a street, as it were, in the brain, and this street would close up but for the grey matter which comes and makes a lining to keep it separate. If there were no grey matter, there would be no memory, because memory means going over these old streets, retracing a thought, as it were. Now perhaps you have marked that when one talks on subjects in which one takes the few ideas that are familiar to everyone and combines and recombines them, it is easy to follow because these channels are present in everyone's brain, and it is only necessary to recur to them. But whenever a new subject comes, new channels have to be made. So it is not understood readily. And that is why it is the brain and not the people themselves, refuses unconsciously to be acted upon by new ideas. It resists. The prana is trying to make new channels, and the brain will not allow it. This is the secret of conservatism. The fewer channels there have been in the brain, and the less the needle of the prana has made these passages, the more conservative will be the brain. The more it will struggle against new thoughts. The more thoughtful the man, the more complicated will be the streets in his brain, and the more easily he will take to new ideas and understand them. So, with every fresh idea, we make a new impression in the brain, cut new channels through the brain stuff, and that is why we find that in the practice of yoga, it being an entirely new set of thoughts and motives, there is so much physical resistance at first. That is why we find that the part of religion which deals with the world side of nature is so widely accepted, while the other part, the philosophy or the psychology, which clears with the inner nature of man, is so frequently neglected. We must remember the definition of this world of ours. It is only the infinite existence projected into the plane of consciousness. A little of the infinite is projected into consciousness, and that we call our world. So, there is an infinite beyond, and religion has to deal with both. With the little lump we call our world, and with the infinite beyond. Any religion which deals with one only of these two will be defective. It must deal with both. The part of religion which deals with the part of the infinite which has come into the plane of consciousness got itself caught, as it were, in the plane of consciousness, in the cage of time, space, and causation is quite familiar to us, because we are in that already, and ideas about this world have been with us almost from time immemorial. The part of religion which deals with the infinite beyond comes entirely new to us, and getting ideas about it produces new channels in the brain, disturbing the whole system, and that is why you find in the practice of yoga, ordinary people are at first turned out of their grooves. In order to lessen these disturbances as much as possible, all these methods are devised by Patanjali, that we may practice any one of them best suited to us. 35. Those forms of concentration that bring extraordinary sense perception cause perseverance of the mind. This naturally comes with dharana, concentration. The yogis say, if the mind becomes concentrated on the tip of the nose, one begins to smell, after a few days, wonderful perfumes. If it becomes concentrated at the root of the tongue, one begins to hear sounds. If on the tip of the tongue, one begins to taste wonderful flavors. If on the middle of the tongue, one feels as if one were coming in contact with something. If one concentrates one's mind on the palate, one begins to see peculiar things. If a man whose mind is disturbed wants to take up some of these practices of yoga, yet doubts the truth of them, he will have his doubts set at rest when after a little practice these things come to him, and he will be preserved, and he will persevere. 36. Or by the meditation on the effulgent light which is beyond all sorrow. This is another sort of concentration. Think of the lotus of the heart with petals downwards and running through it, the susumna. Take in the breath, and while throwing the breath out, imagine that the lotus is turned with the petals upwards, and inside that lotus is an effulgent light. Meditate on that. 37. Or by meditation on the heart that has given up all attachment to sense objects. Take some holy person, some great person whom you revere. some saint whom you know to be perfectly non attached, and think of his heart. That heart has become non attached, and meditate on that heart. It will calm the mind. If you cannot do that, there is the next way. 38. Or by meditating on the knowledge that comes in sleep. Sometimes a man dreams that he has seen angels coming to him and talking to him, that he is in an ecstatic condition, that he has heard music floating through the air. He is in a blissful condition in that dream, and when he wakes, it makes a deep impression on him. Think of that dream as real and meditate upon it. If you cannot do that, meditate on any holy things that pleases you, or by the meditation or anything that appeals to one as good. This doesn't mean any wicked subject, but anything good that you like, any place that you like best, any scenery that you like best, any idea that you like best, anything that will concentrate the mind. The yogi's mind, thus meditating, becomes unobstructed from the atomic to the infinite. The mind, by this practice, easily contemplates the most minute as well as the biggest thing. Thus, the mind waves become fainter. 41. The yogi whose vrittis have thus becomes powerless, controlled, obtains in the receiver the instrument of receiving, and the received, the self, the mind, and external objects. Concentratedness at its sameness like the crystal before different colored objects. What results from this constant meditation? You must remember how, in a previous aphorism, Patanjali went into the various states of meditation. How the first would be the gross, the second the fine, and from them the advance was to still finer objects. The result of these meditations is that we can meditate as easily on the fine as on the gross objects. Here, the yogi sees the three things: the receiver, the received, and the receiving instrument, corresponding to the soul, external objects, and the mind. There are three objects of meditation given us. First, the gross things as bodies or material objects. Second, fine things as the mind, the chitta. And third, the purusha, qualified, not the purusha itself but the egoism. By practice, the yogi gets established in all these meditations. Whenever he meditates, he can keep out all other thoughts. He becomes identified with that on which he meditates. When he meditates, he is like a piece of crystal. Before flowers, the crystal becomes almost identified with the flowers. If the flower is red, the crystal looks red, or if the flower is blue, the crystal looks blue. 42. Sound, meaning, and resulting knowledge being mixed up is called samadhi with question. Sound here means vibration, meaning the nerve currents which conduct it, and the knowledge, reaction. All the various meditation we have had so far, Patanjali calls savitarka, meditation with question. Later on, he gives us higher and higher dhyanas. In these that are called with question, we keep the duality of subject and object, which results from the mixture of word, meaning, and the knowledge. There is first the external vibration, the word. This carried inward by the sense currents is the meaning. After that, there comes a reactionary wave in the chitta, which is knowledge. But the mixture of these three makes up what we call knowledge. In all the meditating up to this, we get this mixture as objects of meditation. The next samadhi is higher.